Welcome to What the Duck, a podcast with real experts talking about direct spend challenges and experiences. And now, here's your host, SourceDay's very own manufacturing maven, Sarah Scudder.
Thanks for joining me for the What the Duck, another supply chain podcast brought to you by SourceDay. I'm your host, Sarah Scudder, and this is the podcast for people working in the direct materials part of supply chain. I'm at Sarah Scudder on LinkedIn and at S Scudder on Twitter. If you are new to the show, make sure to follow this podcast so you don't miss any of our direct materials supply chain content. Today, I'm going to be joined by a very, very dear friend of mine. Last time I saw her, we actually went hiking in SoCal, Sneha Kumari, and we're going to discuss how to make process improvements to drive cost savings that directly impact your bottom line. You work for a manufacturer and are struggling to improve your supply chain processes, then this episode is for you. Sneha is sleep deprived and exhausted, but a proud mom of two little supply chain nerds in training. She's also a Six Sigma Green Belt certified professional with over a decade of experience leading quality, supply chain, and operational activity orgs that she's worked with globally. She was also recognized as one of the few operations women leaders by McKinsey for her experience in the field of operations. Welcome to the show, Sneha.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm wearing green. So that's, my love for SourceDay here.
SourceDay or Sneha is on brand almost every time I see her on camera. So I absolutely love that about her. And it's kind of a miracle that this interview is happening right now. I moved to Austin a little over a year ago to join the SourceDay team. And we are having one of our crazy freezes, which I am not used to from living in California. So have been without power and electricity. Half of our neighborhood is still down. We've got trees and craziness everywhere, but I was able to get into the office today.
That's commitment.
So Sneha, describe yourself in one sentence.
That's hard to do, I would say. But I have to start with what I represent, which is I'm through and through supply chain nerd. Looking to solve supply chain challenges every day, both personally and professionally. So I have to say that leading change management professionally has actually prepared me very well to be a mom of two very young boys who has helped me hone the skill of managing change and, dealing with supply chain disruptions day in, day out. So they make sure that I walk the talk every day in my life.
Biggest pet peeve?
It has to be, it is my pet peeve, but also something that I embrace, which is resistance to change, especially in manufacturing organizations. So how do we, there is resistance to change, but also something that I love to be tackling. It's a challenge that I look forward to working with and helping ours navigate that change.
When you are not getting your supply chain nerd on, which is most of the time, what do you do for fun?
For my idea of fun is almost always revolving, whatever time I get is, be around my kids, be able to spend time with them. But recently I have picked up pickleball. So I am loving playing pickleball. So it's an easier form of tennis for me. So I'm loving pickleball.
So my friend Darcy, who lives in the Bay Area, has become obsessed. And I want to say she plays it 5 days a week now and does some pickup games where you just show up. And pickleball is huge in Austin. So my parents got me paddles and the pickleball. So I'm going to my goal is to play this year.
You love it. I'm loving it. And also my son plays with me. He's 5 now, almost turning 5, not yet. So loving it.
So Sneha, I'd like to have you share your story. So go back in time and talk about how you actually got into direct materials procurement.
Yep. anyways, like by trade, I'm an electronics engineer. So I started my career in quality. So it's doing a lot of quality stuff and hardware, working with sensors, server, client environment. But then I moved my team to more and more of an R&D space wherein we were doing new product introductions day in, day out, like working on new products. That's when my interaction started with suppliers firsthand, like going out to them, negotiating prices, because when you're doing R&D and new product, we were a small division. Then how do you actually leverage for cost? Like all those challenges started coming in. So that's where the love for procurement, love hate relationship started with procurement. But that's when I started learning those skills, working with them firsthand, bringing them in, and then how we made the products happen, and then moved it to the sustaining production team.
So you started in more of the engineering R&D quality route, then you pivoted, and kind of walk me through your progression of how you made that change and then what you're actually doing now.
Yeah, so it started there. We started with direct materials procurement, and then slowly that started encompassing the whole idea of, okay, how are you looking at your demand, and how are you managing it appropriately to be able to meet specifically, like the times, specifically for NPI. Sometimes meeting the delivery points is critical also for being competitive with the market. So meaning making sure that those were happening on time, making sure that the forecasting piece was also corrected. That's when the bits and pieces of supply chain started coming in, and I knew that I needed to get my master's in supply chain, because I just wanted to understand the overall end-to-end business side of it. Like, how are businesses actually handling all this program? End-to-end supply chain is huge, it's strategic, tactical, and many people use different terms to do that. So then I was doing strategic procurement, then took a little bit of tactical team, like leadership role, where I had like planning and buying functions, inventory management, forecasting, warehouse logistics, reverse logistics, all of that come in, kind of like also like leading new product launches, also sustaining operations. Um, all of this happened while I was working for home automation and manufacturing industries. So I got to know, and when I say manufacturing industry, there could be many things. As I've worked with automotive and industrial markets and oil and gas and the sensor electronics based markets, all of that. So different markets have different challenges, although the supply chain basics are the same. So I've done end to end, from bringing materials to make a product to actually making it to delivering it, and maybe also sometimes bringing it back because of RMA. So that gives me a very good idea of where the conflicts happen, why shared metrics are super important in supply chain, and how do you actually set yourself up for success. And continuous improvement has to be a mindset for
Yeah.
any organization.
Yeah, you're one of the things that I think is unique about you is you're really got a good full picture. You haven't just focused on one facet or one part of supply chain, which I think is really, really important with all the disruptions and craziness that's been happening in supply chain. You mentioned going and getting a master's. One of the other things that you've also done is you've received or went to school, got a certification for something called a Six Sigma Green Belt. What is this?
Yeah, so I do want to highlight that it's not it's not that I run after, like I highly advocate for certifications. But Six Sigma is something that's super dear to me. I actually started my Six Sigma journey with my first employer, like when I was at Honeywell. That's when, since then, I've been exposed to Six Sigma. So it has become a mindset. And I always say that Six Sigma is a business initiative, not just a quality initiative. That's what people like forget when we are talking about Six Sigma and trying to make people in your organizations aware of this. It's a way of doing your business that will constantly improve your quality and productivity, and eventually that compare like reducing cost is a byproduct of this process that comes with it. um, Six Sigma, it's very simply put, it's a method that that will give your organization tools to improve the capability of your business processes, and then it helps in performance and reducing variation. So if you're doing a process like, and there's variation in that, that helps, that leads to defect creation, and Six Sigma gives you all that tools, like for example the DMAC method, that will help you reduce your defects and improve your improve your profits. So that's a little bit like really quick nugget about what Six Sigma is. But if anything, it's not just about quality, it's a business initiative, and everyone should understand what this is and why we need it implemented at a certain process, wherever, whatever you're going after it.
So to kind of sum it up, less variation in theory in the manufacturing space should result in less errors and less rejects.
Absolutely. The lesser the variation, lesser the defects, it improves your quality. It eventually then reduces your costs. That improves your bottom line. Like it's related.
So when you and I were prepping for this interview today, you said something that kind of stood out to me, which I want to call out. And you described yourself as a lean advocate. What is this, and why is this so important in manufacturing?
Absolutely. So also like lean is something that I have to, I cannot not credit Crane enough for giving me that exposure to lean. They live and breathe lean. And being able to be part of that organization and imbibe that within me and actually apply that has like taught me a lot about lean and what is it and how to think about it. Again, lean is a mindset. Traditionally, lean talks about, anything that's value added in your organization, any process that's value added that the customer is willing to pay for, should be something that we should be using lean for to reduce the waste in that process. Now, there is a difference between waste and variation. We spoke about variation before. But what I say that value added, like anything that there, when we talk about customers, there could be internal and external customers. So there are transactional process, right? For example, talking about procurement, there are transactional process that happens internally also. So using your lean concepts within your organizations to improve your internal processes is also important. Now, what is lean? Lean is pretty much mapping your current state, understand your value stream, okay? Current state mapping, and then understand what are the redundant or wasteful process. There are many things, there are many categories. Right now, I talk about 8 categories of wastes, which is transportation, motion, overproduction, and like we all know about that. If not, I can share that too. But looking at all the 8 types of waste and see how you can what are the methods that you could go ahead and use to reduce that waste is actually constantly talking about lean. Now, there are many tools that lean gives us. For example, doing a kaizen, or pokayoki, or just in time methods. So there are many tools that also specifically manufacturers use to reduce waste in the process. Now, what I do have to say that lean as a mindset is also about continuously improving. So you cannot aim for perfection. You look at one part of your value stream. You pick, say, for example, your purchasing process, right? And you focus on that. You map that end to end. And when I say map that end to end, remember to note down the depth of it. I mean, how many back and forth you're doing. And that's where the waste comes in. You look for automation and inaccuracies. You implement some as part of your Kaizen. You leave the rest in the parking lot to have more Kaizens to it. But then now you're constantly improving your current state. You're constantly in that mindset, but you're not aiming for perfection. And one last line, like just before we separate, is what lean says is waste is hidden. So the goal is do not hide it. Make your problems visible, go after it, fix it, and then come back again.
It just seems like common sense, right? Common business.
Yep.
Everything's not perfect. And if someone portrays that, it should make you question, because there's always ways to improve and get better, especially in manufacturing when you're dealing with so many moving parts.
Absolutely.
So, Sneha, the topic of our interview today, which is why I had originally asked you to come on our show, is to how to make process improvements, which is kind of your core and something you've done for several organizations, to drive cost savings that directly impact your bottom line. So let's start by breaking down what you actually mean by this.
Yep. So let me give you an example of what exactly I'm talking about when I'm talking about process improvements to drive cost savings, and then we'll also get a little bit into how direct spend is also is impacted by some of the wasteful methods that companies do follow. So okay, I'll go back again to my first love, which is manufacturing. So get into manufacturing. We are looking at, for example, something as simple as going on the production floor, okay, and then understanding what my days are looking like. We have runners, we have work orders printed. We know we have, for example, 10 orders to be run today, and we'll have supervisors go around, move into each production line, tell them what orders need to be done, and then you probably planned for 20 people to show up today to make those 10 orders, right? But sadly 15 only showed up. Okay, now my supervisor is scrambling.
COVID flashbacks, right?
Yes. So
When
now
you're supposed to have 20 and, one or two show up.
one or two show up, and of course you also are talking about physical distancing and all of that. Oh my god, like, let's not even talk about the craziness we had during COVID, managing production, managing shifts, managing vendors, offshore vendors. Oh my god.
It makes me crazy
It
thinking
was
about
it
it, and I
was
wasn't even on the production floor.
but we evolved, right? We innovated so much during that, especially manufacturing, so kudos to them. Like, we innovated a lot. But anyways, okay, so coming back to, so now he or she, our various supervisor, is scrambling that who to put, because then you have skills, special skill sets, when moving people around, if you are working in that kind of business. So based on your tribal knowledge, you're trying to move people around, making sure that 10 orders go out of day, although you're not always successful. And there's a lot of chaos, commotion, while we were doing this. Plus, also remember, we probably did not do a good job in making sure our efficiency goals were met, right? That will show the next day. So day in, day out, if this is how manually we are managing the process, there is a gap. There is something that we need to stop, look for the root cause, go fix it, while of course sustaining your operations. I mean, easier said than done. We need to continue sending our orders out, but have a champion. Have a champion look at this, find your bursts in the process, wastes in the process, and see how we can fix it. So now here I was talking about manually looking at your work orders, manually trying to assign people around. But then why don't you go out and look for a scheduling tool that could help you, enable you do this, and give you the live data at your fingertips, sorry, trips, and intelligently be able to do that job for you, while you invest your time in better process, which is probably looking at a machine downtime and why that happened, or proactively looking at some hot orders, some of the opportunities that you lost because you were scrambling around during the day trying to fix and get the current customers orders out. So those are the process improvements or gaps that I talk about. So this is very simple, and anyone from manufacturing or running shop floor operations listening to this will agree, like, cent to cent, everything that I said right now. So, and when I say that, you don't need to go invest hundreds and thousands of dollars doing an ERP implementation. That's not for everyone, right? There are other tools in the market that you should take the time, explore, look for automation, even if it's an Excel. Okay, think about some kind of automation. You need to start somewhere, and then invest wisely and make sure that that change happens. When that change happens, of course, involve the people, involve the doers in that, so you get the most out of that change. If you're investing in a license, in a tool, in whatever tech tool it is, and make sure that you make the most out of it by involving your doers in that process, so they get how to use it, and they become your champions and ambassadors. So that's the process improvement changes that I have been working with, and along, and sometimes even built some of these tools myself.
So it makes me think about, if I'm on the shop floor, this seems like a no-brainer. Of course, there's things that we're doing that we could automate or free up time to be more productive, but that's not always how management sees it. So how can you go to your senior leadership team and get buy-in and get whatever is needed, tools, resources, et cetera, to actually be able to go in and make process improvements?
You're right. You're absolutely right. And that's when, in my case, like in the middle management roles that I have led, there's always been, say, for example, a doc, white paper or a presentation, like a small internal pitch deck kind of thing, like I am pitching for this idea and why, right? But when making your case, it's when we are making our case, we need to understand, for example, let's actually get into direct spend, right? Let's talk about that. um, Direct spend it impacts like something as simple as business continuity, right? You cannot, like, that's your day in day out. If you are screwing up there are it's going to affect your customer relationship, it's going to affect your revenues eventually, right? It impacts production schedules. So it is super important that you invest your time making sure that we are eliminating waste in the process. Now, in general, if your company is thinking lean and talking about kaizens and all of that, they get it. Okay, you go do a kaizen, you find out your waste, you make a case, we need to go ahead do something about it. But then you also, when you're making a case, you understand, okay, you cannot go out there and just say, okay, this is what I want. You need to have, like, say for example, you do your due diligence in doing some RFQs and have some 3-4 options that you have evaluated before going and proposing to management that, hey, I want $100,000 investment in this store, right? Okay, why? What's your short-term and long-term plan? Like, what's your containment action, what's your long-term action, and how are we approaching it, and how much investments do you need? But then have your ROI numbers ready. And it shouldn't be rocket science, because I tell you, the number of hours you save by putting that automation in, with your helping your buyers not running after their purchase orders and fixing those numbers and the errors that they make, you could easily justify the time and opportunity costs there. So that's how you make your case. Go with the numbers, because most of the time, not like 100% of the time, leadership understands numbers. That's why they're running a business, right?
Mm-hmm. I would also say that if you are going to start really focusing on making process improvements, it's a journey and it doesn't happen overnight. So it's something that you need to start small, I feel, and build up and build out a solid process over time. But what should a buyer or somebody who's on the production floor or managing a team, what metrics should they be tracking so they can measure the impact? You mentioned the importance of having data and metrics, but what should people be tracking?
Yes, metrics is super key. Actually, I didn't even touch that. For example, I was talking about, for example, efficiency for production floors. Like, earned hours is a very key metric, because every labor hour counts to the value that customer is paying for. But in general, if you're looking at buyers and planners, like, they are our support functions, right? Supporting everything, buying of inventory. If you're talking about purchasing, the so the first thing is actually, what's your RFQ lead time looking like, right? What's your on-hand inventory looking like? What's your ITOs looking like? Because in my case, as a team, I was responsible for ITOs for my function, by my
And for
functions.
those who don't know, what is an ITO?
Inventory turnover. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just used to using the jargon. Sorry for the audience. But yeah, inventory turnover. And inventory turnover doesn't have to always be at the organizational level. If you are responsible for your value stream, you know how fast your inventory is turning. And buyers, in our case, a director responsible for procuring that inventory. So having that, your vendor lead time, your on time delivery in full, so OTIF, for whatever vendors that our buyers are responsible for. So looking at some of these metrics, so I break down my metrics clearly, how strategically it aligns with my overall business initiative, which is quality, delivery, costs. And you could have 1,000 metrics within that, but you know which ones, you weigh each of them, you give them different weights, and then you make sure that when you say quality, what does quality mean for a buyer? The quality of the POs that they are placing, right? How accurate it is. Now, what's on-time delivery? What's the on-time delivery in full working out for their vendors? How good or bad that is? Do we need to go back, put them on a get well program? And cost is, of course, cost is a very shared metric, which happens with the category commodity managers, that they work together. Sometimes even at a lower level, we do have buyers also negotiating for some of the tail spend of vendors. But those are some of the key metrics that every organization should be focusing at. It could be very different for very different, like retail has totally different metrics. For example, they could be talking about weeks of cover, because they are so short. They are looking at very short span of times, versus, say, a longer lead time. An industrial manufacturing company might be looking for something as long as 5 months. So how you're managing your vendor lead times and getting ready for the business. So The metrics are different, but overall the measures that you should be targeting should be categorized in some or most of these measures that I just mentioned.
So it sounds like there's three or four. Look at your industry, right? It varies per industry, but highlight or pick out three or four things that you're going to track and really hone in on and focus on that, because I think you also can get stuck in analysis paralysis where you're tracking 20 or 30 different things and then it just becomes too overwhelming and too much.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Like it, whatever adds to your business, whatever adds value to your business, because sometimes you care more about delivery and not cost, but for some you are providing premium value, so costs matters. Just align whatever strategically your business is aiming for.
So the other thing I've learned throughout my career is when you do something new, so if you're going to embark on process improvement for the first time, things happen.
Yep.
So what should people avoid? What are the red flags to make sure not to do when you're starting to focus on this process improvement journey?
Actually, I have to say, like, the first step is to start, right? And then doing a mistake is absolutely okay. Repeating is not okay, right? That means you ignored that mistake. So I think the first step for process improvement, like, is go ahead, get started. At least start with a Kaizen event, or just do it event, like do a 1 day event. Understand where you are at. Understanding that, having that basic understanding actually is an eye opener. We were doing a sticky note current state mapping once, and very soon when we started involving the doers in the process, that sticky note went from, for example, a 10 sticky note process, it in no time it went to a 70 sticky notes process, because there was so much back and forth happening. You would be very pleasantly surprised when you dive deep, when you get into the nitty gritty, when you ask the people how they are doing. Oh, but I need to go back, get his signature before it comes back to me, before I send it to the vendor. These things happen. So getting started is probably the for me is like a win there. When you get started, then you do your process, and you probably find out that maybe you did not manage the change well, because when you are audited, that when you started auditing for your results, like, you had the targets to improve, right? And after you implemented the technology or tool or change or Six Sigma, whatever you did, you thought, I will improve my process, I'll improve the lead time by 10%. Now when you audited it for the next month, you really didn't see that. So you found out that maybe I missed change management or training, or whatever that soft measure that you had to implement. And so you go back and understand, why did you miss it, what happened, what was the breakdown, and then go back and correct it. And also make sure that whatever process you followed, that correction is also made in the process, so next time that learning is not missed by any other person doing that Kaizen or event or change again. So that's like have a containment action, have a long-term action, make sure you find your mistake, correct it, stop, correct it, and then move on to whatever
And
next.
make sure you document that so
Yes.
other people within the organization don't make the same mistake. So how much does it cost to make process improvements? I know you said, it doesn't require buying an ERP or some sort of expensive software, but if I'm new to this and I want to start doing process improvements, how do I even know what to budget?
What to budget? Well, that's a tough question for me. Why I say that is, it is not a one size fits all kind of thing, right? It also depends on what revenues you're going after. Maybe you are a big $100 million company, but there is one particular value stream that's super painful for you right now, right? And that could be just like, for that's 50% of your business. So now you need to understand, like, as a business leader, like, whoever is your champion needs to understand that how much are you willing to invest to get the benefits. It could be quick, it could be late, but how much are you willing to invest now in the short term to get the long term gains? But ultimately, every leader is looking for your ROI, right? Whatever your ROI is looking like, and if you're looking for immediate gains, you probably are ready to invest, because it's so painful, it's hurting your brand, it's hurting your USP, unique selling point. So you're willing to that. Also, some things to remember is when you're doing a tech tool change, you might be sold with the fact that it will bring immediate changes. That's not always the case, because
I
remember,
would say
change
that
management,
most of the time it's not.
yeah, most of the time it's not. So be mindful of that you cannot investing $100,000 in a tool will not give you a change in your improvement in your reduction in your cost by 10% in 2 weeks. That's not going to happen. It doesn't work like that. It takes time to make that change, to help people adopt your new tool before you start reaping the benefits. So I mean, to be honest, I cannot put a cost to it, but I'll give you an example. Like if you are a $10 million business, I would say it wouldn't hurt for you if you are looking for growth, you have more customers coming in for orders. You absolutely need to stop and take a look at your operations, because remember, margins is a component of sales and costs, right? So for your margins to go up, just sales going up and costs following is not going to help you. Your cost needs to go down too to gain better margins, which often many SMBs need to understand and stop and look out for. Like, okay, now you're growing. Now I know. Look, now I want to be producing or delivering my services efficiently. So, what are the tools or people out there who can make it happen for me? And then based on that, whatever, or know your why, of course. Why, if you need it, if someone is telling you to buy an ERP, why are you at that stage yet? And then invest in tools that will make sense long term, based on if you're trying to grow 10x versus 2x in the next year, and maybe in implementing a SaaS tool can help you get there in 2 years and in your cost reduction. So it depends on where you are at pretty much, and what gains you're looking at, what's your growth rate looking like.
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned software several times as something that you can do. Other than software, what other resources are needed or should be considered to start making process improvements?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, software is not the only tool, right? It's one tool. There's so many other things. Of course, I know so many businesses running their businesses on Excel. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. If it works out for you very well, go ahead, do it. Make sure that you understand the costs involved in doing it, the manual labor, efforts involved in doing that. Um, Excel is also a software, by the way. But then there are other things that you could do with.
Email. Let's not forget email in the equation.
Yeah, let's not forget but my pet peeve again is, people do not understand the landed cost, the overall costs about this. It's not just about, how it's just not just about the lead time and all that. It's also about opportunity cost. It's also about inaccuracy costs that you incurred, which you probably never looked at because you were running your process manually. But that's for probably a separate day. But there are, like, upskilling is also a part of this. Like, how are you upskilling your people and making sure that they understand the newer concepts better? Something as simple as Six Sigma, that's not a software, it's a process mindset. How are you training people to understand that? So they are also constantly looking for variation and understanding. There are some statistical tools that you could look at to reduce waste. But all of this needs investments of some kind. It's not free. People also talk about training. Training is great, but it's a very soft measure. Remember, you need to go after hard measures and mistake proofing to truly implement a process change. Like, you can go train people and tell them, okay, you have to input 0 in this field, you cannot do 1, right? You can say that, and you just trained and you left. Trust me, there will always be human errors. People rotate. Maybe you did not document it. So training is a very soft measure to make any process change. That's my take on this. You should always look for, again, mistake proofing. How do you actually make sure that no one is able to put 1 in that field? So again, you go back to the software and then try to fix it. But upskill your people while you're looking into softwares, if those are tools. But otherwise, Kanban, Lean talks about SMED. There are a lot of concepts that you could use to improve your processes.
Thank you for discussing how to make process improvements to drive cost savings that directly impact your bottom line today, Sneha. And of course, love that you are rocking the green. Where would you like to send people to find you? I know you're working on some cool new stuff as well, so feel free to share that.
Absolutely. So find me on LinkedIn, find me on Instagram. I'll probably be sharing my Instagram also, trying to make sure that I am also being more active there. But LinkedIn is the best place to find me, follow me, connect me. If you viewed my profile, I will send you a connection request. That's how I go for it. And
The
yeah, I
LinkedIn
mean,
stalker, the
yes.
LinkedIn stalker, Sneha.
Yes. So I am gonna, I am definitely gonna connect with you. But in general, like, if you ever want to nerd out about supply chain, about your challenges, feel free to send me a text. Trust me, I will take out time to talk to you, even if it's for 15 minutes. I I love solving problems. I love supply chain challenges. I've been working on some new stuff that also helps manufacturers and construction industries improve their bottom line and costs. So those more news coming on that soon as well. But feel free to find me and drop me a text. Would love to connect with each and every one of you.
If you missed anything, you can check out the show notes. You can find us by typing in What the Duck, another supply chain podcast in Google. To have the optimal search results, make sure to add another supply chain podcast at the end of your search. To ensure you don't miss a single episode, make sure to follow this podcast and subscribe to us on YouTube. I'm at Sarah Scudder on LinkedIn and at S Scudder on Twitter. This brings us to the end of another episode of What the Duck, another supply chain podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Scudder, and we'll be back next week.